Hello, dear listener, and welcome to Sitcom Showdown episode 109. 109, Steve.
Oh, it's getting up there.
Yes, it certainly is. My name is Jeffers. I'm one of your hosts, and I shall introduce you to my brother, Steve. Steve.
Hello, listeners.
And it's my choice this time around.
Yeah. Tell us what you chose.
I chose AbFab. Absolutely fabulous, which I'm going to tell you all about in a minute. Now, do you have any comments on AbFab at all before we get started?
Well, no, but I was just wondering, is this something you watched a lot of back in the day, or what's your background to it? No?
No, and I'll reveal all about that as well, but it's something I've only dipped in and out of, and in fact, I may not have watched an entire episode before doing the research for this. But there we go.
Interesting.
Yeah. One thing we do need to get out of the way, though, Steve, which you asked me before we started recording, which is this choice of mine a Hall of Fame nomination? And no, it's not. I think it's just time we looked at AbFab.
Yep.
However, we did select it on the basis, it was selected on the basis of it being apparently an awesome episode, according to some AbFab wikis and fan sites, and IMDb and all that sort of stuff. But I shall tell the dear listener and yourself more about AbFab, which, as we know, it is a British sitcom. It ran for 5 series. We're a total of 39 episodes if you whack in the specials they did.
Yep.
Not including the movie. But it started in 1992, and the very first series of AbFab was on BBC Two, and all the subsequent ones were on BBC One. So that's a good sign, isn't it?
So it got promoted, did it?
It got promoted to the big leagues.
Okay.
Yeah, up to Division 1.
The Wrexham of sitcoms.
Yes, certainly is. So the first 3 series went bang, 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 1992 to 1995. But then there was a gap of 6 years, and Series 4 went out in 2001, which in a way is cool because, being 9 years since the first series, as culture and technology has changed, they're able to get a lot of, new things that happen. So, for example, mobile phones would have become a thing, so that they would have been able to incorporate how that affected the lives of the characters and stuff. Anyway, Series 5 was in 2003. They did Christmas specials in 2002 and 2004. So in the off years, they'd, throw a special to the fans just to keep them, engaged. Have one of these. Anyway, there were 20th anniversary specials as well. Anyway, I wanted to talk about the director, Steve-o, because the first 3 series of AbFab were directed by Bob Spears, which I'm sure is a name that'll be familiar to you.
No, I'm blanking on what Bob did.
Yeah, well, Bob Spears is one of those people, is you see his name come up in credits so much on so many things we watch. So, for example, The Goodies, Fawlty Towers, Are You Being Served, so much stuff. So he kind of started out in the Perry and Croft sitcoms, It Ain't Half Hot Mom and this sort of thing. I'm sure you'll be thrilled, Steve, to find out. Oh, by the way, he did Bottom Series 3, so that's really cool.
So he would have been regarded as a very safe pair of hands.
Oh, God, yeah.
By the stage.
Very much so, yeah. And so when they did the Australian version of Are You Being Served for 2 years, they brought him over to do both series of that. I don't know if that's a plus or a minus on one's credits list. But, Steve, and hold on to your trousers here.
Right.
He did a couple of episodes and helped the lads get set up for Leno and Woodley. There you go. Yes, he directed Leno and Woodley.
No way.
There you go.
So he made some connections or something when he was out here for the Aussie version of Are You Being Served?
No, I think it's the other way around, because you might recall, because I remember you rolling your eyes when I told you that when Leno and Woodley were in the UK, they won the Perrier Award, and they went over down a storm that year in the U of K. And so maybe they set things up there. I'm not entirely sure.
Is that the Perrier Award? Is that something that happens in Edinburgh?
Yeah.
Okay.
God. I hope we do better as we move on in the podcast. Anyway, what I want to do is put you on the spot now, Steve, and say, look, do you remember ever watching any AbFab when it came out or having any reaction to it or anything like that?
I think I looked at it and I've
decided it wasn't for you.
My opinions have been fairly consistent about it over the years. Let's put it that way.
Fair enough. All right, well, then let me change tack. So if I said, all right, Steve, based on what you know, would you be able to sum up the premise of AbFab in a few sentences?
Yes. Rich, spoiled women behave badly, irresponsibly.
Yep.
How's that?
That's
hitting pretty close to the mark?
Not too bad, yeah. Could be flushed out with a bit more context, which I'll do. I'll do that. So yeah, like you, I knew who the characters were, the basic premise. I knew it was very, very popular. No, I never really made it through a whole episode. I certainly haven't watched a series, but I'm making the case that it definitely deserves coverage here on its reputation alone, and just on the strength of the cast. Amazing cast. When it first started, I'd just moved out of home at the age of 19 or something like this. And this sort of thing wasn't on my mind.
Yep.
You know what I mean? So I wasn't interested in the fashion adventures of some middle-aged women, despite knowing who the cast were and enjoying their work and all that sort of stuff. So I think it. And then I just never engaged with it from then on, which is fair.
Well, you would describe the people in this as adjacent to the whole young ones and all that crew. Absolutely, yeah. And in fact, you could describe them as more than adjacent, I suppose, in ways. But yes, we'll get into that in a minute. Okay.
So absolutely fabulous as far as the series go is a British sitcom that revolves around the life of Edina Monsoon, a PR agent who's desperate to stay young and trendy. And so she is, good Lord. And her best friend, Patsy Stone, who's a magazine fashion director with a penchant for substance abuse. And that's putting it lightly, I think.
We see a bit of that in this episode.
You see a bit of that in every episode, I think. Yeah, absolutely. Edina's daughter, Safi, she's often the voice of reason because her mother and Patsy are just complete loose cannons, and so someone has to hold down the fort. And she plays a central role in the series. The sitcom also features June Whitfield as Edina's mother, who's just called Mother. There you go. And Jane Horrocks as the quirky assistant Bubble. And so this series was created by the great Jennifer Saunders, based on the sketches Modern Mother and Daughter from French and Saunders. And it says here, apparently the show is known for its sharp wit and satirical take on the world of fashion and PR. Oh, so that may well be the case.
It has to be true then.
Yeah, for sure. So the episode I chose, Steve, is rated one of the best by a lot of the fan sites and on IMDb. And it makes sense because it's a Series 2 episode. So it's Series 2, Episode 5. The title is Poor. So there's a big hint for you. But the thing about Series 2 episodes, and this is just a loose theory, but for any sitcom, in Series 1, this idea you've had coalesces and then you learn how to make it as you go. And quite often a lot of your best ideas get pumped into Series 1, but then you've not known how the casting is going to work out, the style of the whole thing, the reaction to it. And so when Season 2 comes along of any show, you know what you're working with when you're writing it because you know how the actors are portraying it. You can take inspiration from them. For all the reasons that Series 2 episodes are often the peak of a show, I feel. So
yeah, I think so. 2 and 3 seem to be particularly good.
I reckon you're right. Yeah, what I want to talk about...
Sorry, did you say that this was...
Series 2?
Yeah.
Episode 5?
Yep.
Yeah. I think I'm not trying to draw too many comparisons between Australia's own Kath and Kim and AbFab. There's a hint of connection, and I'm going to include What We Do in the Shadows in this 3 sitcom comparison of what I'm calling the guest star curse.
Right.
What happened with Kath and Kim, of course, is they were great for the first couple of series, and then because everyone loved it, and people like Shane Warnes and Kylie Minogues and these sorts of people want to be involved, they have to write these guest parts for them, and then it gets very contrived. And instead of telling the story they want to tell, they have to cobble together these situations in which they can encounter celebrities, but often the celebrities aren't playing parts, they're playing themselves. And how are you going to turn down megastars wanting to be in your show? You're not going to. And I think this happened to AbFab. And so AbFab then had to crowbar in Elton John and Twiggy and Jean-Paul Gaultier and all these people, you know what I mean? And so I think their later seasons, they're going to have been spoiled by being too self-aware and having to cram in these guest stars. And I think What We Do in the Shadows is now suffering from this. And I think they're teetering on the edge of this particular curse. I'm sure lots of other shows have suffered from this as well, but you'd never see, Fawlty Towers, for example, having Liberace to come and stay at the hotel or whatever the hell, whatever celebrity, Kevin Keegan, or I don't know, Steve, but this is just...
I think for comparison, it would have been interesting to also look at Extras by Ricky Gervais. And I think, the show was written on the premise of him encountering these, like a guest star every week. So a completely different way of approaching it.
That's true.
Well, maybe we'll have a look at that sometime.
Yeah, it's easy to do for extras, I think, and that'd work quite well. But when you're looking at suburban, wherever it is for Kath and Kim, it has to be, you have to try a bit harder.
You need a pretty big crowbar to make that work.
Man, you certainly do. Anyway, this particular episode called Poor, the elevator pitch is that Adina discovers that both her ex-husbands, these are blokes called Marshall and Justin, by the way, Steve, the husbands have cut off their alimony payments. So Safi conspires with Adina's accountant to, she sees her opportunity to make Eddie think that she's poor. Yes, and so she reluctantly agrees to reduce her expenses. Anyway, there's a trip
I have questions about this.
Yeah, okay, cool.
People would have thought that there's going to be some amazing guest star in this episode, but you're referring to the later.
I didn't want to give the listener that impression. Yeah. No, this was just, there's no big guest stars in this one.
As we'll soon discover.
Yeah. I just wanted to make the point that that's what I think has happened to AbFab.
Yeah.
Right, so let's start with Joanna Lumley, who plays Patsy Stone in AbFab, for which she won 2 BAFTAs, Steve, for this role. Yeah, it is.
Was that, do you know what it was for?
And do you mean the nomination as a category could have been supporting, yes, or best comedy actress or something along those lines?
Okay.
I didn't look further into it, I must say, because we've got a lot of stuff to get through. That's my excuse.
I'll see if I can sidetrack you. Yeah. Is this her only, in terms of awards, is this her only awards?
No, dude, she's won all sorts.
Okay.
Yeah. I think she's got a Tony Award in the cupboard somewhere, which is pretty amazing.
Is that for like musicals or something like that?
Stage, certainly.
Okay. Named after Tony.
That's him. So she received the Special Recognition Award at the National TV Awards in 2013.
Okay.
I've not heard of the National Television Awards, but I'm going to assume they're very prestigious. In 2017, she got the BAFTA Fellowship Award, so that's certainly beyond AbFab,
Ooh, That sounds like
it's big time.
Something that you get voted on by your peers or something.
Quite right. She did begin her career in the 1960s. She was a patient in the show Emergency Ward 10. And then she did heaps of films in the 1970s while she was, young and glamorous and in her 20s and stuff.
Yep.
Then, in the very late 70s, early 80s, she was, of course, Steve in Sapphire and Steel.
Yep.
Alongside David McCallum. I've called it a weird but popular show, and I think that's fair.
A cult classic?
Cult classic, yeah, for sure. She started that show when she was 33. Now, I know age isn't important, but I like to bring it up for actors just so I can compare them to my own life and where I've gone wrong. Anyway, before Sapphire and Steel, which is what I remembered her for, before my time, she, of course, did the New Avengers, and that was sort of more in the mid-70s.
Yeah.
26 episodes she did of the New Avengers. But sitcom-wise, she's done single episodes of all sorts of stuff, dude, including Steptoe and Son, which is pretty cool. Are You Being Served? She did 2 episodes of that. She did a 1971 show called It's Awfully Bad for Your Eyes, Darling, which is about 4 posh girls sharing a flat in London.
I was thinking what did you say, Steptoe and Son and...
I haven't got any other sitcoms listed here, but yeah.
Oh, really? I thought there were a couple there that were kind of working class sitcoms. And it would have been interesting to see her in those roles because she's usually cast as a bit of an up-class
High
person.
class, yes. But what I was surprised by when I was looking through her IMDb, as we do, was that she was, used to pop up on the 2 Ronnies and the Kenny Everett television show. What? I would have thought, because she would have been well famous. So why would she be slumming it on Kenny Everett's show? Maybe she likes a laugh.
Perhaps she was doing someone a favour.
Yeah, could be. Or, she just loved Cuddly Ken. I mean, everyone loves Cuddly Ken. Come on.
We have seen her on an episode we covered of Are You Being Served? I think she was on Mr. Grace's arm.
Wasn't she?
In one of those episodes.
But yes,
we have seen her before in something like that. Yep.
There's going to be lots of callbacks to old episodes of Sitcom Showdown in this, Steve. Right, where were we? So she was in AbFab, as we know, but in the 90s, she had her own show, and it was called Class Act. Oh, that ties in with what we were saying before. So that was a 1-hour show, so it wasn't a sitcom strictly speaking, but it was quite comedic. And otherwise, she did star in a sitcom called Dr. Willoughby in 1999, which is described as a comedy series about the antics of a TV soap cast and crew, and it sort of, follows them on screen and off screen. So that's interesting as well. So she had tons of stuff on in the 90s. But let's talk about Patsy Stone very briefly, because Patsy Stone, the character, is a former fashion model. She's a magazine fashion director, and she's a former pornographic actress who has slept with every one of the Rolling Stones, which is a fine pedigree. So Patsy shares a codependent existence with Adina and acts as her enabler, which she totally does. So they're just chain smoking, drinking, spending their days shopping around the joint at boutiques and stuff, and going to lunch and avoiding their respective workplaces, basically.
Yep.
Anyway, that's Joanna Lumley. We're going to be going through the cast for a while, so strap yourself in, listener. Dame June Whitfield, Steve, the great Dame June Whitfield, who we've also covered in Sitcom Showdown. I'll talk about that in a moment, but she left us in 2018, sadly. But she had been called the go-to comedy actress for 3 generations.
Whoa, that's an impressive quote.
Yeah, I think so. As far as I could work out, she was first on screen as a dancer in 1946.
Whoa.
And in the 1950s, she was in Hancock's Half Hour and the Tony Hancock Show. And you and I, Steve, covered her in the 1961 Hancock episode, The Blood Donor, as the reception nurse.
Okay.
So she's guaranteed immortality just on that alone, I think. Not us covering her, but being in The Blood Donor, that's like a major, you know.
No, I like to think we lifted her stock a bit.
Possibly so, possibly so. So that we covered that in Sitcom Showdown 16, which was 7 years ago now. Also in the 1950s, Dame June had been in a show with Spike Milligan and Peter Sellers and Eric Sykes, and it was called The Idiot Weekly, price 2D, which I believe is 2 shillings. Anyway, her comedy career really took off in sitcom terms, I think, with her leading role in Beggar My Neighbor in 1966. 3 series of that she did.
Whoa.
And then, of course, you've heard of Terry and June.
Yes, heard of that one.
But before that was Happy Ever After. So that ran in 74 to 79. And then Terry and June was 79 to 1987. So even by the mid-80s, she was a sitcom legend. Then going further back, one I sort of skipped over. There was a 1969-1970 sitcom with Harry H. Corbett called The Best Things in Life. And that ran for 2 series. So I've never heard of that before. Yeah. That might be one to check out. There's a hell of a lot more anyway, but in a nutshell, she headlined so many well-loved sitcoms. And she did single episodes of squillions of other shows. So you can't really go wrong. I think she's a British comedy legend. And as I always like to do, reference Filthy Rich and Catflap, Dame June wasn't in it, but her daughter, Susie Aitchison, who's also an actress. Susie was in episode 4 as Jill, the secretary of Jumbo Whiffy. Hooray for that. Anyway, in AbFab, she plays Adina's mother, which, as I said before, she's just named Mother. And she's been described as being sweetly insane.
Oh.
Yeah. That's an awesome role to have. We want you to come and play this role. We want you to be sweetly insane, which means you're likable, but you're also unpredictable. So
sounds great.
Like a Laszlo Cravensworth or something like that. Okay. Any comments before we move on to Julia?
Happy to move on.
Cool. So Julia Sawahla. So she's in the Sitcom Showdown Hall of Fame as an actor. So we did a whole special on Julia in episode 57. That was 5 years ago, Steve. And by the way, all our episodes are available on YouTube, which is easier than searching your podcast providers. So like my podcast app only goes back 20 odd episodes or something. But we've whacked them on YouTube so people will find them more easily. So Julia, core blimey, her career took off with the character of Linda Day on the BAFTA award-winning series Press Gang, which is fondly remembered by a lot of people of my generation. Anyway, that aired from 89 to 93, and Stephen Moffat of Doctor Who fame was involved in that quite heavily. But it was her portrayal of Safi in AbFab that cemented her status as a comedy icon, it says in the text I stole, Steve. But anyway, in this role, yes, she's Eddie's daughter. She's the sensible one. She's the counterpoint to all the sheer manic insanity of the main characters, Eddie and Patsy. But Julia is just an amazing actress. She's been in major roles in so many sitcoms. Steve, I wanted to run Pride and Prejudice and Lark Rise to Candleford by you.
Yes, I like talking about these.
Yeah. So do you remember her roles in?
Well, she's the post mistress in Lark Rise to Candlewood, and she plays the wayward daughter in Pride and Prejudice, the one that runs off and elopes.
Would you say, her strengths lie in drama, or do they lie in comedy, or is she equally facile in both? Or
I think she's across both, yeah.
Well, that's quite the compliment.
Yep.
What are some of the other roles? Okay, so she was in Faith in the Future and Second Thoughts. So she was the daughter in that with Linda Bellingham as the mum from memory. And, of course, we enjoyed her in Jonathan Creek. Well, I'm speaking for both of us, but I enjoyed seeing her in Jonathan Creek. I always enjoyed Jonathan Creek. It was a tremendous series. Had you bailed out on Jonathan Creek before she came on?
Oh, yes, undoubtedly.
Okay.
Did you know that she can sing a bit?
No, I didn't know that.
She was on The Masked Singer.
Like last year or the year before? Or?
I don't know.
Yeah.
And I mean, she's been in the game since her childhood, so
Yeah. And went
no
to
doubt
drama
she got
school
trained
and
in all that stuff.
I reckon so.
Yeah.
Yeah, but as I said, she was Janet in Time, Gentlemen, Please. A great role as the Aussie barmaid, which is very much the opposite of Safi. That's why I think she went for it, to be honest with you, because she could be completely and utterly opposite. Anyway, there's so much more, and we will move on to Jennifer Saunders. So we've saved the best for last in a way. So she created, I know you're shaking your head in wonderment at how's Jeff going to justify this, but trust me, I will, Steve. Once you go through Jennifer Saunders' career, you go, holy crap. Well, I did. So she's the creator of this series. She plays the lead role of Adina, Eddie Monsoon. She's had this amazing comedy career starting in the 80s as part of the comic strip, which you know all too well. So they were a group of alternative comedians that performed at the Comedy Store in London, and then that spawned the Young Ones and all the associated stuff, French and Saunders, everything. So by 1985, which is fairly quick, she headlined the sitcom Happy Families with Adrian Edmondson, and she played 6 characters in Happy Families. She played, a range of females from that family. Yep. And that was written by Ben Elton between The Young Ones and Filthy Rich and Cat Flap. But she did 2 series of the sitcom Girls on Top, also starting in 1985. So she's headlining 2 sitcoms in 85, after only breaking onto the scene in, 81, 82. French and Saunders started in 87. That had 6 series. And she was in 30 episodes of the Comic Strip Presents, of course. So this is all just the 80s. And then she's developing AbFab. And then that saw her through the 90s with massive success. And she wrote all of AbFab basically on her own. So other people, you look at, say, Bottom, for example, which started around the same time as AbFab, but Rick and Aid had to write that together. Whereas, you've got Jennifer doing it all on her own.
Yep.
That's quite amazing. She also wrote Jam and Jerusalem, which did 3 series. She starred in Let Them Eat Cake with Dawn French. She was in episodes of Roseanne, Friends, and all this. I think this is the curse of the guest star, but she wasn't guest starring as herself. But, all these people loved her work so much, they brought her over there to act in a role here and there and all that sort of stuff. But the credits and the plaudits do go on and on and on, so I'm not going to list them all here. But I think, honestly, I had to look at the output and I had to analyse it on paper, comparing her to her husband, Adrian Edmondson. And she's kicking his ass in terms of career, sitcom, comedy sort of output, really. And in fact, it compares reasonably favourably to pretty much most people in British comedy. And I was quite surprised by that. And I think the reason I was surprised is I've never really connected with any of her performances. So I'm talking her up here, but that's just from a on paper standpoint. And I've always found it difficult to connect with her characters. Yeah, and that's probably why we've not done any of her stuff on this show before, because I'm not really mega into it, but I think it deserves to be covered.
Where there's smoke, there's fire. If all those people like it, maybe we're the ones that are wrong. Yeah.
It's been known to happen before.
Once or twice.
Yeah. And before we move on to the synopsis, we're 2 hours in already. I just want to run through some of the minor characters, Steve.
That's right. We'll timestamp it on YouTube so people can skip.
Yeah, cool. I don't know how to do that. I'll rely on you. Jane Horrocks played the role of Bubble, the ditzy personal assistant to Eddie. Certifiably in a loon, I would say, Bubble. She also played a character called Katie Grin in AbFab. She's been in 32 of the 39 episodes of AbFab, so definitely a major player in this sitcom. She's had nominations for Best Actress in the Olivier Awards. Not for this role, I should say. Yeah.
Okay.
She's had Golden Globe and BAFTA nominations as well.
Nice.
So Jane Horrocks is killing it in the acting game. Sitcom-wise, she was a long-running character in the Sky One sitcom, Trolleyed. Now, have you come across Trolleyed before?
It's not ringing a bell.
Oh, it's another one of the...
Sounds like a shopping centre sitcom.
Yes, a supermarket sitcom. It's a fine tradition of supermarket sitcoms, probably from before...
Oh, you could do an episode all about...
Supermarket sitcoms. This is a genius idea, Dave.
Bruce Forsyth.
Brucey. And your mate, the other one.
The other one?
Oh, God. Anyway, so before Brucey came in, another actor was the manager of the supermarket.
Oh, okay.
And I think it was Leonard Rossiter or someone like that, but I could be wrong, so I'm going to cut this out.
No, just say listeners. Help us out here.
Yeah.
Leave a comment.
Supermarket sitcoms. So in Trolley, yes, a supermarket sitcom, she was Julie Cook, and this ran from 2011 to 2015. Anyway, Steve, she was recently-ish in a sitcom called Bloods for 16 episodes as one of the two main characters. Now, this actually looks really good. I'll watch some of this. And I think they're first responders. And so somehow they've made a sitcom out of being first responders and presumably paramedics and hospital and all this.
Ooh.
So there'd be a lot of dark humour in that. But
I
I
think so.
was impressed by the trailer, I must say. Not impressed enough to remember details, but I remember coming away from it thinking, bloody hell, that could be all right. Anyway, other regulars for AbFab include Helen Lederer, who's one of the very, very few people, Steve, to appear in the holy trio of Young Ones, Bottom and Filthy Rich and Catlap. Then there was Christopher Ryan, of course, who was Mike from the Young Ones. He's Marshall, Eddie's other ex-husband.
Yes, I saw his name pop up.
Yeah. And Harriet Thorpe, who you and I know is Carol the receptionist from the British Empire.
Ah, yes. Very good.
So she was Fleur in AbFab. And the episode we're looking at doesn't have a hell of a lot of Eddie's office or the magazine where Patsy works. So we don't see Helen or Harriet, unfortunately, because they're great. But what can you do? All right, let's have a little clippy poo. And then we'll come back and launch into the epic synopsis.
Yep.
Wheels on fire, rolling down the road. There's nowhere by my next of kin. This will shall explode.
Oh, my car's here. Oh, Eddie, I thought a little mosey down Bond Street, a little sniff around Gucci, sidle up to Ralph Lauren, pass through Brown's, and then on to Quag's for a light lunch. Yum, 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 yum.
Tell her.
Oh, I've just got to pop in
Mum.
for a bit of... I've got to meet my accountant this morning. It won't take long, will it, sweetie? Why? Well, because her bastard father and Marshall are trying to cut off my alimony payments, that's why.
She's been bleeding them dry for years.
Whose side are you on? Do you want us to be poor? You'll be poor.
That's got you worried.
Eddie, we simply cannot allow them to cut us off like this. Now, listen, sweetie, it is not alimony. It is compensation. Yes. Yes.
For what?
It's damages, sweetie, for those long, crippling hours of painful labour I went through on your behalf.
You had a cesarean.
Yes, I know. I had a cesarean, darling, but how do you think it feels for me to wake up every morning and look down and see her stomach still smiling back up at her?
There's nowhere by my next of kin. This will shall explode.
The episode itself opens with Eddie. She's getting herself together for the day. You know, we got makeup, outfit, lots of shots of shoes, grooming. She's putting little glittery stickers on herself and all this sort of stuff.
It's hilarious.
Yeah.
She ends up looking like Captain Jack Sparrow
Well said, Steve. Oh,
or a
yes.
clown or a cross. Yeah, a cross between Captain Jack Sparrow and a clown.
That's a perfect summary, I think. Yeah, no, totally. Now, somehow this is funny. I didn't get it myself because the audience laughs several times, which is generally a good sign because if you can get laughs without dialogue, right, you're always doing well. However, it could just be a laugh track. Who knows?
This was filmed live in the studio, I think.
Yeah.
So what was so hilarious about her, like, putting a shoe on?
This is what I'm saying. It's going over our head because there's probably all sorts of nods and winks to fashion and stuff and something women might understand.
Right.
You know, or glamorous men that we're not understanding. But what it brought to mind for me, Steve...
Are you saying we're not glamorous men?
We're not, and this is why we don't put ourselves on the cover of this podcast. You know, in the modern day, have you heard of the GRWM, Steve? Not the ASMR.
GWM.
GRWM.
GRWM.
It's a whole genre of YouTubeism. It's called Get Ready With Me. Have you come across these Get Ready With Me videos? No. Okay.
What's this about?
Okay, so basically, and again, I'm going to be sexist here and confine it only to women rather than us glamorous men, is that they'll have a YouTube channel and they say, right, I'm off out to a fancy nightclub or whatever, and the whole video is get ready with me. So you choose your outfit and they're recording
goodness.
themselves choosing their outfit and putting on their makeup, and then they'll talk to you about their life while they're putting on all their stuff and getting ready and
Right.
tizzying themselves up. And that's a whole genre of YouTube stuff that does incredibly well.
Wow.
Just
Never
like the
gets,
ASMR.
The algorithms never sent that my way.
No way. So if you were going, right, I'm off down the shop, you can get ready with me with
It would be
Steve
a very short video.
and you'll find your flip-flops and your shorts and which T-shirt am I going to wear today. Now, you're wearing a fantastic, what looks like the Flash T-shirt
Flash,
there, Steve.
yes. That's why I'd get ready so quickly.
Oh, Steve! Oh,
The ads that you had to sit through before you got to my video would be longer than the video
yeah.
of me getting ready.
Well, I'm glad you said that because they managed to compress Adina's getting ready down to 30 seconds, which is perfect for a YouTube short.
Being bald has its advantages.
Yeah, that's right.
Stick a hat on. We're done.
Yeah, but which hat? That could be a half-hour choice.
Okay.
Ooh. Right. So Eddie's managed to do a good job. She kept it under 30 seconds. She comes downstairs in this wild outfit, which, as you said, is Captain Jack Sparrow dressed as a clown. It gets commented upon by Mother, who happens to be there, and we get some bickering. There's a lot of bickering in this show. But the dialogue here is a bit clever politically. When Eddie says, look, Mother, the 70s are back. And she says to Eddie, Mother does, she goes, oh, does that mean you'll be voting Labour again, dear? Which is a blow to Eddie's credibility in front of Safi. And so Eddie whispers to Safi, I've always voted Labour, sweetie. Because, of course, when she was young and hip and cool and all that, she would have voted Labour as a child of the whatever generation she was. But, of course, when you turn into a massively rich person who lives in London, I imagine that you want to hold on to your money.
I was
so
going to
you'd
ask
vote
you about
Tory.
her politics because it seems a bit all over the place.
Yeah. Well,
Just purely based on this episode because
like,
she has a left-wing rant at the judge later on.
yeah.
But, obviously she's well-to-do.
Yeah, so I think, like a lot of people,
So I'm
Steve,
not sure what's
she
going on here.
wants to protect her hoard of cash and votes Tory, but wants to be seen to be virtuous and say that she's down with all the politically correct stuff and vote Labour. So that's what I mean. It's a nice little bit of work there from Jennifer Saunders. I thought that was pretty cool. Anyway, Eddie asks what Mother is doing there. And Mother replies, I'm seeing the house while you can still afford to hold on to it. And that foreshadows the plot. So they re-establish the other mother-daughter relationship between Safi and Eddie with a bickering in that Safi is now forced to make Eddie a fancy coffee from the machine, darling. Don't use the kettle. Eddie's
Back when a pod machine was bleeding edge technology.
It would have been too. Ooh. Right, where were we? Yeah, so Eddie's taking advantage of Safi before she goes off to be a student, and we've got a clip.
Oh, go on, darling. Make the most of mummy while you're still at home before you run away to be a student.
Oh, you told her, dear. Well done.
Although why anybody wants to be a student nowadays is a mystery to me. No fun, darling. No demos, no experimental drug taking. You're just industry fodder, darling. At least in my day, darling, people used to go to university just to close them down. What will your protest be, darling? Pair of stripy tights and some licorice all-sort earrings? Oh, well, call out the National Guard.
She's just jealous, dear.
I could have been a student.
Oh, thick as two short planks, her report said.
It did not say that. Did not say that. Ask Patsy, darling. She wrote most of it.
In that clip, Steve, you would have heard a school report joke, which I liked immensely. And so Mother was hanging crap on Eddie, saying, thick as two short planks. That's what the report said. And Eddie says, no, that's not true. Ask Patsy. She wrote most of them. And I just thought that was fantastic. Like the kids on the way home from school, if they got a bad report, they'd try and fake it and change the F
They went to
to a
school with
D
each
or
other.
something. Yeah, well, this is what they say, but I don't see how that works personally. It's probably a bit of a...
I always thought that the two characters were a bit separated in age.
Yeah, well, the actresses are, certainly. There's more than a decade gap between them. Not that I've researched it, but yeah.
Interesting. But isn't the point of getting your friend to write your school report that you get a glowing report instead of
Yeah,
the truth?
that's right. Just don't trust it to Patsy. Yeah.
She should have ripped the fake one up and given her mum the real one.
Yeah.
It couldn't have been any worse.
And I'm finding it difficult to believe Patsy's got decent handwriting as well. Oh, this is before she damaged herself with years of drugs and all that sort of stuff. She would have only been 5 years into it rather than 55 years into it. Anyhow, we're 4 paragraphs into the synopsis here. Right, so what I like in that clip we heard, Steve-O, aside from that brilliant school report joke, is that Eddie's sitting there and smoking, right, as she always does. But what she's doing is there's no ashtray. She's leaning over the table and ashing in someone's handbag, which we then find out is Mother's handbag, which she collects when she leaves. This is very subtle. I missed it the first time.
Well, I watched it twice and I didn't see that.
Oh, man. And this is, I think it's got good rewatch value because there's these things going on, which normally I wouldn't credit them with, but it's actually really, really smart. So there's more bickering, and so Eddie's going, where's the delivery from Harrods? So clearly she's getting her groceries delivered each day from possibly the most expensive place you could get them delivered from. And they're out of milk for her coffee. And Safi goes, all right, well, I'll go and get some milk. She goes, you wouldn't be able to get a carton of milk. And Eddie looks nonplussed and turns around and goes, carton? So obviously that can either mean that she gets such fancy Harrods milk that it probably comes in some proper glass bottle, whereas the plebs like us have to have cartons.
I just had this moment where I was thinking to myself, in the era where we had bottled milk delivered in the morning.
Yep.
What was the alternative at the supermarket? And I cannot remember.
No, neither can I. It's probably a bottle of milk.
Maybe there was never a time when you could buy a carton until cartons became a thing.
Yeah.
Now cartons aren't even a thing.
Cartons aren't a thing.
Why aren't cartons a thing now? They're made out of cardboard, which would be more environmentally friendly than
plastic,
the plastic ones.
Yeah, so the waxy cardboard. There is still one brand that does cartons, but yeah, we get everything in plastic now. We really have gotten off track here. Anyway, so I don't know why that joke works, but it does. Anyway, at this point, Mother exits and in comes Patsy. So she's sprinting down the stairs screaming, light, light. And Eddie quickly lights up these 4 ciggies that Patsy's got in her paw. And this is all because she'd caught a non-smoking taxi or been driven by a non-smoking vehicle over to the house. She's 4 smokes behind now, which she would have chain smoked in the vehicle.
Yep.
Eddie had given her all these nicotine patches for the journey. And she takes off her jacket and she's got like at least a dozen nicotine patches all over her. Patsy has. She said, no, they're all dead. Anyway, so Eddie's pulling all these nicotine patches off Patsy. And there's a 2 punchline gag here, which is pretty cool. Eddie says, the patches all look fine. What are you talking about? In fact, they seem to be leaching something out of you. And then Safi sort of quips that Patsy's probably recharging them with all the permanent nicotine stored in her body.
Yep.
Again, it's all in the delivery. I'm not doing it justice in the retelling, but oh man, it was pretty cool.
And there is a quite good line where Patsy says, bloody asthmatic cab driver.
Yeah. Yes.
That's why he didn't want people smoking in his cab, presumably.
Yep.
Because he doesn't want to die.
Which is fair. And Safi says the same thing as she gives them a bit of a lecture about this poor chappie being exposed to secondhand smoke. So after some very unkind banter and picking on Safi, which Safi strikes back at, Eddie and Patsy depart, but not before Patsy manages to sneak a nicotine patch onto Safi's arm. Now, this is presumably for hilarious effects later on.
This was woeful.
Yeah, with the buzzing of the wasp and slapping on a thing.
Terrible. And they do it a second time as well.
Yes, it was unbelievable and clumsy, Steve-O. But that's all right. They are unbelievable and clumsy. Yeah.
No, what's unbelievable is that Safi doesn't twig, but even though she's like clearly the brain box of the whole crew, she doesn't twig to what's actually going on.
No, the plot wouldn't allow that, I don't think.
Okay.
Yeah.
You've heard of plot armor. This is plot dumbness.
Yeah, but it did go on her arm. Oh, my God. Right, so Eddie tells Pat she has to sort of confess, really, because they're out for a fun day, but Eddie has to say, oh, I'm sorry, Patsy, because we got to meet with my accountant, because the 2 ex-husbands are threatening to cut off her alimony payments. Now, we've shared this with the listeners in advance, but this is the point in the episode at which that is revealed. So anyone watching it for the first time would have gone, ooh.
Oh, yeah, okay. So at this point, I want to say, I don't feel like the situation for this whole episode that's driving the whole episode, the plot of the whole episode, they haven't introduced it properly.
Mm.
It kind of just gets dropped into the middle of this conversation that's ongoing.
Yep.
And you don't really, I feel like they really missed an opportunity to have, I don't know, someone come in and say, "Oh no, we've got this big problem." Da 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 da.
Oh, yeah, right.
And maybe the reason for that will be revealed as we move on with the plot. But it gets the issue gets raised in a very weird way, I think.
Like too subdued.
Too subtly, yeah.
Yeah.
Can we revisit this when we get to a later scene?
Yeah, cool. So what we've just seen in the house, Steve-O, is the bickering between Patsy and Safi, who hate each other. And we've seen the intergenerational stuff where Mother and Safi get on well, as grandmothers and kids often do. And then, obviously, Mum and Eddie don't get on at all. And Eddie and Safi don't get on at all. And I saw another episode of AbFab, which dealt with that in a very nice rapid-fire gag, in that Mum said something absolutely hideous to Eddie. And Eddie turns around to Safi and goes, "See, do you know why I do this to you? We've got to pass it on. It's the cycle of abuse, darling." And it was,
Stuff where you had a season in 2024, presumably Safi and her daughter would absolutely hate each other.
Yeah, her daughter would be a rebel of some description and very disorganised and chaotic. And Safi would be going, no doubt. But the set, Steve, with people coming down the stairs into the kitchen, it gave me a hint of the Blackadder stomping down the stairs after something horrible's happened to him in Blackadder the Third, and then taking it out on Baldric.
Mm.
And all that.
Kicking the cat.
Yeah, well, that's right.
Then the cat bites Baldric. Is that what happens? Oh no, the mouse.
The cycle of abuse, Steve. Yeah.
And Baldric's right at the bottom of
The chain.
the food chain of abuse.
That was sort of what I was going for, but I didn't know if you'd go for that and say, don't put AbFab and Blackadder in the same sentence, Jeffrey. I'm glad you allowed it. So we cut ahead to Eddie, Patsy and Safi. Now they're all arriving at Eddie's office, where Bubble was asleep on the couch. Doing bugger all, as usual, I should add.
Well, her boss isn't there, so...
Yeah, that's right. Let's have a clip of Bubble, shall we, Steve, and we'll talk about her briefly.
Blimey, you're here.
Yes.
Was I asleep?
Hard to tell.
I've been here for hours. I'll be really annoyed if I've missed lunch.
It's 11 o'clock.
It's just I'm really, really tired.
Oh, do we have to listen to all this?
Oh, we've sort of got time on our hands now, thanks to Saf.
I turned on the, whatchamacallit this morning.
Radio?
I want to say telephone. No, it's not right. It's not right. You look at it.
Television.
That's it. Good morning, television. Hello. Which I don't normally do, because I find myself falling back to sleep like that.
Good morning, television. My God. If they could market that in pill form, Switzerland would be plunged into a recession.
And anyway, they said, leave home now. There's a strike on the buses. It was really urgent. So I did, and I got here hours ago.
On the tube?
No, I only live down the road. I walk here, so they must be bonkers.
Even worse is the line after that, which I cut, which said, imagine what they're telling other people, meaning that she thinks the television broadcast is directed purely at her for her benefit. Oh, my God. Anyway, despite that opening bit of dialogue, Steve, and we were slagging this off a little bit off air while we were listening to the clip, despite it being a little bit lame, I do love that when Bubble does get up, right, she doesn't just swing her legs onto the floor and walk off. She walks off the couch and uses Patsy's head as a steadying mechanism and really pushing her head down and ruffling up her hair. It's fantastic.
That was one of the comedic highlights of this episode.
Yeah, it was a beautiful bit of physical gear.
Yeah. Patsy's head features in all the best gags in this episode.
Yeah, so she ruined Patsy's hairdo that she probably spent hours on. Anyway, Bubble, to me, given that I'm not very familiar with her at all, she seems like what I've called in my notes here, Steve, is a discount cut rate version of Alice Tinker from The Vicar of Dibley, but without the naive charm.
I like it.
Because they've gone for stupid, but it's I don't know, dude. I'm being tough on Bubble here, right? Fair enough. I'm being tough on the show as well, because I know I'm going to say nice things about it later, and I've said a lot of nice things about it in the lead up. But yes, I was going to...
Good, bad, good sandwich.
What's your... Yeah, that's right. Any thoughts on Bubble from your end there, Steve?
I've got... Nah.
Fair enough.
I tuned out of half of what she said.
Yeah, oh, cool. I wonder if it's because, much like a bubble, her head is filled with air. I'm not entirely sure.
Maybe.
And also, bear in mind that in this episode, she's barely in it, so we haven't had any chance to get familiar with her and to love her. At this point, anyway, Steve, we skip to the accountant, whose name is Malcolm, He launches into his little opening statement, and just as he's getting started, he's only 5 words in, and he drops the word fiscal, at which point Eddie's head just flops onto the desk in defeat, and she yells, "Oh my God, I'm bored!" And I actually laughed out loud.
Yep.
About that one, because that's anything to do with finance or numbers in general does my head in. I thought it was great. Anyway, Malcolm the accountant, he breaks the news to Eddie that neither of her exes have to pay alimony anymore, which again is weird because they already knew that, but whatever. I suppose he was confirming it. They asked him to look into it, presumably. He's looked into it. Confirms.
Yes, but, well, okay.
No.
We'll get to this later.
Yeah, okay, right.
You think, most people are motivated to go into business by making money. So what's she in it for?
Yeah, it gets her entrance to the world of high fashion and all that sort of stuff, and allows her to write off a lot of her lifestyle
Yes, okay.
as a business
I can
expense.
see that. That does come up.
Yeah. Now, did you look into our man Malcolm here, the accountant?
No, I didn't. I thought you might
Oh, Steve!
enlighten us.
I've got a surprise for you. I was so pleased. I didn't think, wow, he looks familiar, and you'll figure out why very quickly. Because that chappie there, Steve-O, is a notable dude named Mark Wing Davey. Now, does this ring a bell to you?
Oh. The voice was a bit familiar, but I didn't recognise him. So, yeah, so where's he from?
Mark Wing Davey, Steve-O, is Zaphod Beeblebrox. Obviously, he had
okay.
2 heads at the time,
Yeah.
and he was
Okay,
speaking
That
American.
might have thrown me off.
And you wouldn't recognise him because he had an eye patch on
Yeah.
and a wig
Wow.
and all the stuff.
That's blown my mind.
It blew my mind as well. But here he's an accountant, or as Patsy puts it, there's nothing much about having an O-level in maths, a floppy disk, and a personality bypass. And bypass refers back to hyperspace bypass and rah. So
demolishing the Earth to make way for a bypass.
Yeah. So I thought that was really cool. Anyway, so having broken the bad news, they ask Malcolm the accountant in yes or no terms, is Adina poor? And Malcolm sort of goes, let me explain. And then we cut ahead to him explaining in gleeful detail about all the ways to shelter her money. And this is, there's a pulled back shot, right, where you can see the clock at the top of the screen. It's now at 5 o'clock, whereas in the previous bit, it had been at 2:10. Now, this is again super subtle because, if people are trying to hammer the point home, a director will have a look, they'll have a shot of the clock and wind it forward or whatever.
Yep.
But it had been about 15 seconds since we last saw the clock, and it's not the sort of thing people would have been looking at anyway. But they did take the time to put the clock forward, and there's, so I thought, again, attention to detail, nice bit of direction, but they didn't absolutely hammer you with it, which is really cool. Yeah, so subtle thing. Anyhow, Malcolm suggests they go through Eddie's monthly expenses and see where any cuts can be made, and then as soon as he says the word cuts, like the look of horror on Patsy's face, they do a close-up on her, and she's like, ooh.
Yes, what could you possibly cut out?
Yeah.
It's all necessary.
Oh, that's right. Anyway, I've enjoyed Joanna Lumley in this episode quite a lot. And like as spiteful and flawed as Patsy is, you need those sorts of characters. I think there's some irony in the fact that Joanna Lumley in this role is far better and more young ones-ish, I am stating, than Jennifer Saunders has been in any role. So like Joanna Lumley as Patsy is more in the spirit of the young ones. In my book, she's got a hint of the Vivian about her, as opposed to Jennifer Saunders' many roles and having a more clear connection with the young ones. But that's going to put the cat amongst the pigeons and set people scoffing at my audacity. That's just my opinion. Eddie gets fed up. She says she's going to take all care of all of this herself. She sacks the accountant. So then we jump ahead to back at the house. There's a kitchen scene with Safi and her dad, Justin. Now, Justin, Steve, is an American actor named Christopher Malcolm.
Oh, he's an American actor.
He's an American actor.
I thought he was an English actor doing a poor American accent.
Depends how long he's lived in England. So I recognised him immediately in that way where you go, I know that bloke, and I just know him, and it's going to kill me. And so I had to go running off to IMDb like a wuss instead of spending 4 hours figuring it out in my own brain. Now
You didn't use the Frank Skinner method.
No. I admire Frank for doing that. 6 weeks later, I remembered who that bloke was.
Sorry, we had to push back the podcast 6 weeks.
Yeah, that's right. So he is the American cafe owner in the comic strip's Fistful of Travelers checks, which I'm going to play to you now.
Whiskey. And steaks. Okay, 2 steaks. Wow. steaks coming right up.
Wait. Make that 4. Each. 6. 8. 10.
Oh, come on, guys. 10 steaks each. Are you joking?
Do we look like comedians? What do you call a man with his ding-a-ling and a piece of melon?
I don't know.
Christopher. See what I mean? Now get the steaks, amigo.
So what I really enjoyed about that clip, Steve, is Rick doing the, what do you call a guy with his dingling and a piece of melon? Christopher, which is the actor's name. So I like to think he sprung that on
paying him out.
on the day. Yeah. So in the script, perhaps it was something else. I don't
It
know.
was probably Bob.
Yeah, Bob. Speaking, I wasn't planning to do this little side quest here, but I just want to throw in a plug in that this year the comic strip Q&A is sort of being toured around the UK, and Peter Richardson is obviously answering questions, and then Nigel Planer's on some of them, and so the different venues they go to, they bring in different actors from different episodes.
Oh, cool.
And they show a different episode each time and do commentary on it and talk about it. And I don't know if there's a Q&A or what, but if I was in the UK, you could bet your ass I'd be getting myself to at least half a dozen of these around the place.
Are they recording them?
Oh, that's a bloody good question. Surely they are, and maybe not releasing them, but they're certainly, you'd have to record them just for the history of the thing. Yeah. All that aside, Steve, Safi tells Daddy Justin not to worry because Adina's not actually poor. She's got investments she doesn't even know about. I know you want to talk about this. But Safi doesn't want Eddie to know that she's not going to be poor because, of course, if she realises, yes, she's still going to have money, then she'll just fritter it all away on crap and continue her spendthrifty lifestyle, which Safi's trying to cure. So it's probably best if Edina thinks that she's hard up, and she might actually curb her spending a bit. Now you're looking puzzled.
Yeah, and also we discover that Dad is going to pay for her tuition or whatever
To college?
at university.
Yep.
And it kind of sounds as if he can't afford to pay both but he can, or can't he? They kind of make it sound like he can't afford to pay the alimony and the university fees.
Ah.
But then it doesn't seem to be the case either. So
And how is it even voluntary?
how is what even?
Well, I
voluntary?
mean, can they just decide at the same time, simultaneously, both ex-husbands, we're not going to pay your alimony?
the whole thing is
Yeah.
doesn't make sense.
No.
It doesn't
Well,
make sense.
yeah.
And how can Safi just cobble this together and convince her mother that it's the case?
I don't know. But here's the thing, is Safi tries so hard and she fails most of the time, is my impression, is that, you can't stop you can't stop the unstoppable force. That is Eddie, especially when she's got Patsy propelling her forward.
Just doesn't. Anyway.
I know. Well, see, maybe if we'd watched Series 1 and the other half of Series 2, we might have got acclimatized to the fact that things don't have to make sense in this show.
Yeah.
And
okay.
in which case we'd accept it a lot more, whereas we might be coming in off the back of watching a super tight sitcom that has everything realistic and justified. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I'm just being picky.
Like News Radio, where it turns out Matthew is a dentist and all these completely believable things.
Sure.
So Eddie comes in, and under instruction from Safi, right, she has to be nice to Justin, which you can tell is just killing her. Anyway, she finds it very difficult to be nice to Justin, and then Patsy comes in, But I love how they greet each other with and this is a very young onesie in that whole scene sort of thing, Pats, Just, and they shorten the names, and I just thought,
They appear to have a tacit agreement between themselves that they'll
tolerate.
play nice in front of the daughter, but as soon as she's out of earshot or whatever,
Yeah.
the truce is off.
So Pat and Eddie announce they're off to do grocery shopping, which clearly they've not done in decades or perhaps never done. So now that Harrods aren't delivering the food daily, they were going to go off to Harrods instead of having it delivered just to buy the groceries. And Safi saying, look, you can't do that because for a start, you haven't got the money. And also, they're not going to be able to accommodate you. So you need to go to the supermarket.
So we have had a time jump here where there's been time for her to get rid of the driver and the car that she normally goes in and buy a whole new car.
Yes, she's got to get her own nice, economical, cheapo sort of car because now she's not going to have a limo, and
Which isn't really, but anyway.
Yes.
Yes, there has been a little bit of a time gap now.
Yeah, and it's quite a fancy car. It's an Alpha, I believe, Steve.
Is it?
Yeah.
Front looks
So I
very
read
Porsche.
somewhere, but you can't trust everything you read on the internet,
No,
can you?
something European.
No doubt. Safi, she goes, "Got to go to the supermarket," and then Eddie says, "The what, darling?" So much like the milk, they're replaying that gag, but she hasn't been to a supermarket. Patsy and Eddie drive off in this car, and I don't know how many years it's been since Eddie's had to drive anywhere anyway. And we get some really nice location work with her zooming around like a lunatic and taking corners the wrong way down streets, and
Somehow they got the rights to Hotel California.
yeah.
And this is where the hair comes in again, because they decide they're going to put the top down on the convertible, and Patsy's hair gets caught in the thing as it's going down.
And it really did rip a chunk out, and it looked quite,
Well, you get the impression that it's not attached to her head, right?
because, it's probably rock solid and crusty, and, it just pops out.
Yep.
No, I'm glad you liked that.
Yeah. Oh, this, I was very impressed with the location work, and they certainly spent a bit of money on it, I would think.
Yeah, it's looking that way. And remember, at the time, it had had a fairly decent first season, but this is the first time they'd been on BBC One instead of BBC Two. I can imagine Series 3, and especially Series 4, and so might have had much larger budgets, but they did good with this one.
Unless they did the old trick of throwing all the money at one episode and having a bottle episode in another one or something.
Could be.
Who knows?
Oh. They run all these red lights, and they go the wrong way down the street, and they're trying to speed across this zebra crossing and tooting the horn at everyone saying, "Get out of our way." Oh, man. So they go road rage on this lady and bash her car with their handbags, and, it's a whole scene. Anyway, so as they go off, this lady presumably writes down the license plate and dobs them into the coppers. Anyway,
is this after they've been to the supermarket?
No, this is before.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So they get to the supermarket. Now, the humour supposedly comes from the fact they haven't been near a supermarket in decades, or perhaps never been. So they take 4 trolleys instead of 1, and then just piling it up with all this stuff like whole turkeys and all these sorts of things. So they don't have any idea of quantity. And obviously, it's going to cost them a pretty penny when they eventually get to the bloody checkout.
This is hilarious to me. Well, are you going to talk about the champagne now?
No, go ahead. Yeah.
Right, so they're fully loaded up with, I think, 3 trolleys. And then just as they're about to go to the checkout, Patsy sees on the end of the aisle these boxes of champagne, and she's imploring Eddie, can we buy this champagne? She says, "Oh, no. Safi won't let me have the money to buy this box of champagne, but they must have $5,000 worth of groceries in the trolleys already.
They've got the most expensive
Turkeys,
fruit. Yeah.
all sorts.
A massive box of cornflakes that I was eyeing off. Whoa. Look at that. But yeah, them two in the supermarket is a bit like a member of the royal family going to the supermarket. But then I put more than 5 seconds thought into it, and I said, no, it's actually worse. Because unlike Eddie and Patsy, the royal family are actually forced to interact with actual human beings on a very regular basis. They have to go to charity events, and they're the patrons of certain things, and then they have to meet ordinary folk and interact with people. And whereas Patsy and Eddie are probably in their own completely tiny upscale London, Paris, New York bubble of the fashion world, right? They have no idea how anything actually works. That's quite a depressing thought, to think that the royals would have much more idea about how the world works than Eddie and Patsy. But there you go. I think I'll get shot down for that one as well. But they do stack up the 3 trolleys. They do steal that carton of champagne, don't they, Steve? So anyway, the supermarket scene, I've said here, it had so much promise, and I know I'm unfairly comparing it to the supermarket scene in Filthy Rich and Cat Flap.
No one put a turkey down their trousers?
Yeah,
Or a
no,
chicken?
no, that's right. They didn't have all the meat in their trousers. But the one bonus it did have is it was filmed in an actual supermarket, which was great. And so it had the edge on Cat Flap in terms of location, but they didn't make hay with the possibilities of that. They didn't push down an entire stack of tins or smash up all the fruit or any of those things.
Now, we don't, we kind of just leave that scene.
Yeah.
And don't really see, well, we later find out that someone must have actually clocked them stealing the champagne, but we don't see that.
That's right, because it comes up in the charges at the end of various things. So I think as the investigation went on, it would have been uncovered. So then what happens after the supermarket is they go to the... Yeah?
But how, unless someone took some action at the time while they were at the supermarket, how would they
Well, you might have missed a scene here,
how would
Stephen.
they find their way?
Yeah, because
back
there was
to
the
that?
whole thing with the boot outside the department store, you see. When I say the boot, I mean they got the boot put on their car, the clamp, and all that sort of stuff. And so they would have had to appear on that. Because there was...
How would the court or the police have known that they nicked this bottle of champagne?
Okay,
this
so
box of champagne?
we'll go through the thing and maybe it will resolve itself, dude.
Okay.
So from here...
Step me through it.
They go to a very posh department store, and they obviously, because you can't park in London, says he who knows nothing about it. They go around this shop 4 times, and then they go, "Oh, bugger it, we're just going to drive up on the pavement and park there," which they do. Now, the boot, they had so many groceries, they couldn't close the boot. So the boot's open with the groceries. They got all this crap on the back seat as well. And I did notice that they already had half a dozen pieces of paper under the windscreen wipers, so they've already been fined like 6 times at this point. And then they just pull up on the
And
pavement.
they've only had the car for 2 days.
Yeah, or less. They've probably had it for, So they go into the department store. Now, this is where Patsy says, "Let's start on the 5th floor. There's a bar up there." So they go up there and presumably get hella pissed. And they do a bit more shopping, because they come out with these bags of fancy department store stuff, which completely, they've obviously blown money they don't have. So Safi would be furious.
But really does have.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. We'll untangle that.
Good luck.
Maybe. So then they come back down and there's a clampy booty thing on the car. So they have to go and get the car bailed out, which is going to cost them more money and all this sort of stuff. And then because they'd been at the bar and they were smashed, then they're driving home and they're in very poor condition and a copper pulls them over and Eddie's like, "Why is this person right up my tail?" And she waves them to go past, which was funny. And the copper says, "Step out of the car, please." And then she just collapses out of the car, completely hammered. And so here we see that the cop has probably just gone, "This car, there's all these fines on it. There's all this stuff here." And so I'm assuming, Steve, that there was some sort of low-key investigation where they trailed them back to wherever and would know that they stole stuff, drank, drove, and did all the other horrible things they did, and assaulted that lady. So the lady has called the cops as well, and said there's 2 mad women with this
I'm
license
on board
plate.
for that.
Yeah.
But in the day and age where you can't get police to properly investigate anything...
This is 30 years ago, Steve.
Okay.
But yes.
Bear with me. What you're telling me is that the police would have seen the shopping in the back, found a receipt, taken the time to go to the supermarket just to ask them if they might have shoplifted one of the items that's in the... Come on!
I've just had a thought.
What?
Right, so they must have pulled them into some sort of interrogation room and just questioned them at the station for something. But of course, because they're dumbasses and they're hammered,
might have just mentioned
they
it.
would have just told the whole story from beginning. Tell us the story, and then they would have dobbed themselves in. There you go. Problem solved.
I don't know.
Oh, come on. I thought we did well there.
Why can't life just be made a little easier for everybody, huh? Why can't it be more like the continent? Where a man can just park his car on the pavement and then run down the street in front of charging bulls whilst letting fireworks off out of his bloody nostrils without anyone blinking an eye. Huh? God, it's probably a local holiday and nobody's at work because they all want to have just a little bit of fun and they're not intimidated by some outdated work ethic. I mean, there has to be more to life than just being safe.
Is there a point to all this?
Yes. Why do we pay taxes? I mean, just to have bloody parking restrictions and buggery, ugly traffic wardens and bollocky pedestrian bloody crossings, And those bastard railings outside shops so you can't even get in them. I mean, I know they're there to stop stupid people running into the street and killing themselves, but we're not all stupid. We don't all need nursemaiding. I mean, why not just have a stupidity tax? Just tax the stupid people. Die! Yes!
Any more of this ridiculous rant and I'll put you both away.
Here.
Naturally enough, though, Steve, they end up in front of a judge. So they're in court. And again, I'm being unfair.
Another
There's
time
a-
jump.
Well, yeah, no, there is a time jump. Absolutely, yeah. So they're now in court. And so you've got, Eddie and Patsy there. And also Mum is in the back row. And Safi's there.
Yep.
She got fined thousands of pounds.
$50,000
Yeah, and then she has to pay
pounds in damages.
on top of that. Plus she has to cover all their damages. And what I love is Eddie just turns to Safi and says, well, getting rid of the driver was a false economy, wasn't it? I enjoyed that, Steve-o. You're shaking your head there. But then there's a good line from Safi who advises Eddie not to speak in her own defence by saying, that's not a good idea, Mum. Your mouth is working for the prosecution.
Yep, that was the best line in the whole episode.
It wasn't too bad, was it?
Hands
So
down.
the judge is reading out all this stuff and sentencing Eddie to also, well, not sentencing, but, reading the charges and the fines and all that. And Mum is in the back going, here, here, because she wants to stick it to Eddie. But there's another bit of nice callback. So Mum's in the back, right, and she's working on a quilt. And so I don't know if you missed the lines at the very beginning of the episode where Mum had gone in and she found these, what she thought were old clothes in a bin bag, but were actually Eddie's expensive dry cleaning.
Yes. Yeah.
And she cut it up for patches to make this quilt and took it to the charity shop. And so this charity shop has got this quilt made out of Christian Dior and Yves Saint Laurent and all that sort of stuff. And Eddie was telling her off for it. So that's a nice little callback with Mum doing the quilting in the back. So what the fans love about this episode, of course, is this bit, which is Eddie's amazing rant. This is the scene that makes this supposedly a classic episode. And the judge says, I sentence you, Mrs. Monsoon, to, and then the credits roll. And people who might have turned off when the credits had rolled, like myself, missed the last bit. And so tell us about the last bit, Steve, and what happened.
Well, they're paying off a conversation that happened earlier in the show where they were talking about potentially having to do community service for some old person that smells of urine. And of course, they've been sentenced to do active community service for an old person who smells of urine, and it's hilarious.
Excellent. Was that hilarious in quotes, or did you
Hilarious
like it?
in air quotes.
Oh, Steve. It's a very linear plot, but I think AbFab must be by default a comedy of characters and of wit, and not a plot comedy, in the way that your Seinfeld is and your Fawlty Towers and these sorts of things. Would you agree with that?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was not obviously only one plot thread, and it didn't really seem to kind of ramp up as you sometimes see these other ones do.
Oh, and also we should point out that the finish here is another nice bit of location work.
It is very nice.
I've got to say. Yeah.
Yep.
It's pretty good. I want to very quickly mention the judge who's guest starred here. Now, he's not anyone I'd ever come across before, but the dude's name is Hugh Ross. He does, and I don't know how it made it onto IMDb under television, but he does a hell of a lot of Big Finish work. So if the listener's not aware of the company Big Finish, they do audios that are 90% Doctor Who related, and they'll be, various Doctor Who spin-offs, or they continue the Doctor's adventures, various incarnations and all that. He does a lot of stuff for Big Finish. He's in every other bloody production. But he's also been in episodes of Poirot, plays doctors a lot, he plays military type people a lot, that sort of thing. So back in the day he did a Doom Watch and Dempsey and Makepeace and these sorts of things as well. So born in 1945, so he's getting up there. This is what I was thinking, is I saw the judge, and we only get a side-on view of his face, but his skin is remarkably good for someone who would have been 50 years old.
79.
Cool, blimey. That's right. And I thought, man, why have they got this dude who's about 30 playing a judge? But
well, they shoot him from the back anyway, don't they?
Yeah, and the side.
And
but inside on, he must have, the left side's my best side, darling, he would have said. And, shoot it from there, even though the director would... Whatever. Let's have a little break, and then I'm going to find my notes.
Driving without a license, driving without insurance, not wearing a seatbelt, having no tax disc displayed, driving over the legal speed limit, driving under the influence of alcohol, allowing another person to drive your vehicle under the influence of alcohol, in the region of £5,000 of parking fees owing, £6,000 of damage to property, charges of assault and abuse. The charges of attempted murder and robbery have been dropped. Shoplifting.
My name is Patsy Stone. I'm an alcoholic. And what she did was an act of humanitarian mercy.
That is hardly a reason to steal a crate of champagne.
Have you any idea how much champagne costs these days? I was forced to steal it. My daughter wouldn't have allowed me to buy it.
I must ask you to sit down and stop wasting the court's time.
That was a nice little clip, Steve. Have you got thoughts on this episode of AbFab? Be they kind or unkind or middling?
Well, I would just say that it's confirmed my general opinion of the show, which is it's not really for me.
You're not the target audience?
Maybe not. I don't know. Who is the target audience for this show?
People who love fashion, for a start. The female side of the population, I would say.
Yep.
Do you have to be British to have an appreciation of this? I don't think so. I think it went down a treat in the all the Anglophiles in America would have loved this, and I dare say your fair share of Australians as well would have loved AbFab.
Yep. I didn't really like it very much. There was only a few jokes that I thought really worked, and the plot was a bit of a well, there were opportunities left ungrasped, I would say. A bit of a miss for me. I'm just not sure also that a show where mother and daughter are so horrible to each other is really that palatable. What do you think?
No, well, I generally don't like shows where people bicker at each other. I like the conflict to come from the characters interacting with a bad situation rather than the conflict to come from people, and this is where, and you've pulled me up on this before, and if I'm using Bottom as an example, you've got two characters. Most of the sitcom is just them two in a flat sniping at each other. And then I love the show and I'll watch it. We were covering a previous sitcom and I'd said, I don't like sitcoms where people just sit there and bicker at each other. And then you said, but what about such and such and such and such? And I had to go, oh yeah, well I like those ones.
This is the whole conversation I had to myself in my head. I'm going, people love this show. Why do I hate it so much? And I'm thinking to myself, they're basically a couple of rich drunkards. And I'm thinking to myself, but I like other shows where people do that. So, I had a hard time kind of putting my finger on why I don't like it.
Well, at least you put some thought into it, which is more than a lot of people do, Steve. Right, so normally what I like to do if I'm approaching a new sitcom is to watch a few more episodes so I can become acclimatized and then find out if it's a typical episode or an atypical episode. And just to get used to the characters and stuff like that, because, this is just what you do. So I watched a couple of other ones and I'm slowly coming around, but I think I dived into this one first and I took all the notes and everything. And, I concur with you in that it's still not my cup of tea, but I think if I invested more time into watching it, I'd start to figure out what they're on about and then grow to like the characters. Like this did wonders for me in terms of appreciating Jennifer Saunders more, because although I still don't like the character and I don't really get on with a lot of her characters, I was thinking, okay, is she doing a good job? Because you don't have to like a character. Do you know what I mean? For someone to...
Why don't you like the character?
Oh, because there's a hideous character who isn't full of good qualities. Eddie's got mainly bad
personality
qualities.
and their moral character.
Yeah.
Because she's also got a very stilted way of speaking and moving and everything like that. Have you noticed that?
Yeah, I have.
She's
but
like,
she throws...
Darling,
Yeah. And I guess that's the thing.
I find that a bit off-putting as well.
I don't like watching Ricky Gervais's David Brent. It irks me. It annoys me. I can still admire it and say this is good, but I wouldn't want to sit down and watch it. And so in the same way with AbFab, I'm thinking I don't want to follow the adventures of Eddie Monsoon, but I do love the character of Patsy Stone. And I like Julia Sawahla as an actor, but the Safi role, it's having a role where someone's always put upon and they constantly have to be the policeman and be the buzzkill wouldn't do wonders for you. So I've got such conflicted thoughts on this because the cast is so good and the show's got such a great pedigree and popularity.
I'm in agreement with you about Patsy and Safi. I think they're done really well.
It's a mixed bag. And as I say, I know it's a bit of a get out of jail free card, but that doesn't mean it's not true. In that if I watched more, I think I'd appreciate it a bit more. So I stand by that this is a character comedy and a wit comedy, not a plot comedy. And the best comedies have great characters and great plots, right? And the worst have neither.
Yep.
This is somewhere in the middle, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, like I said, I respect the show. I respect the cast. I can see why it's got a good following. I'll again bring up the Kath and Kim parallel. I think you have to just be into the cult of Eddie and Patsy in the same way that people are into the cult of Kath and Kim.
Yeah.
Or
So just remind me, what is the parallel between this and Kath and Kim?
So Kath and Kim is, written and led by two ladies who do this mother-daughter relationship, which is quite fractious at times. And Kim, she loves her fashion, and Kath loves her different generation of fashion. And there's quite a few parallels, dude. So Kath hasn't got an offsider like Patsy, but she has got her new relationship with Kel, which Kim doesn't like. And so Kel and Kath are just they're a very self-contained, well-oiled team, and they just love each other so much. And it's similar here with
there's positive
Patsy
energy
and
in
Eddie.
that show.
Yeah, that's right. Whereas this is a bit more spiteful. So in general, I guess, in that show, you've got mostly nice people and Kim's just a bitch. Whereas in AbFab, you've got mostly shit people, whereas Safi's the lone nice person.
Interesting.
And I think we need to then
When
go
she's
on
not
to the character.
deceiving her mother about the state of her finances.
Oh, exactly.
teach her a
exactly,
lesson.
yeah. Had to be done, Steve. But the character of Mother, what did you think of June Whitfield in this?
I don't think we got to see her best in this. And you're saying that she's
Sweetly insane?
sweetly insane. That didn't really come across in this episode.
So she didn't say anything too bonkers in this one.
No.
Okay, fair enough. But I thought June Whitfield was great, and Mother, she gets zingers in.
Yep.
And I quite liked it. So I did watch a couple of other ones, and she gets some good lines. So there's a lot of good about this, but it's just not for us, is my conclusion. And we haven't bought into the cult.
Yep. I think we could definitely look at Kath and Kim sometime. What?
I'm
Why are you
always
saying-
very wary of bringing Australian sitcoms into Sitcom Showdown, Steve-O, because, you might shoot them down. Pew, pew, pew. Especially...
I think off the back of this, where we're saying, everyone else thinks it's great, it's a similar kind of situation, I think. Did you ever, get into Kath and Kim?
Oh, hell yeah. I've got all of them, all of the ABC series on
that's
DVD.
good. That's good.
Jane and I used to just watch them over and over again back in the day. So I've watched a lot of Kath and Kim, dude. Yep.
Your niece has got a pretty killer impression.
Has she? Of which one?
Yeah, of Kath.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Look at boy.
Yeah, all that stuff. It's really good.
All right. Well, I'll pencil that one in for later in the year.
Yes. Right.
After we've done all series of Bullpit and 70-odd episodes of Kingswood Country.
Yeah.
Great. Righto, so mixed reception there for AbFab. I pay my respects, but it's not for me. Right, so are we going to be back again in roughly a month's time or so?
Yes, we will be back again roughly in a month's time, and I'll give some thought to what I'm bringing to the table.
Very good.
There's a couple of ideas floating around, so yes, we'll see.
Excellent. We have had a suggestion to cover Not Going Out again, because I've been threatening to do a Christmas episode of Not Going Out for about 4 years now, which I still haven't done.
You've got to admire the persistence of our listeners.
Oh, yeah. And fair enough too. So we'll see what happens there. But people can contact us on our Facebook page and by, as it says in the outro to this podcast, sitcomshowdown@gmail.com.
Yep. Thanks, everyone. We'll talk to you in a month or so.
Cheers. Join us next time on Sitcom Showdown when we'll be putting another 5-star episode under the microscope. And in the meantime, you can contact us with feedback on Facebook, Twitter @Sitcom Showdown, or by email sitcomshowdown@gmail.com.